Elina Beketova is a democracy fellow at the Centre for European Policy Analysis, CEPA. She has experience of working as a journalist, editor, and TV anchor for news stations in Kharkiv and Kyiv. Elina is originally from Crimea. At CEPA, Elina authored Behind the Lines, a project about the latest developments in the temporary, occupied, and recently liberated territories of Ukraine. For that study in particular, she interviewed a wide range of Ukrainian voices, policymakers, activists, and officials. Now, this is the second time we've talked on the channel. We are going to be discussing a lot of what has changed over the last year, and of course, what has not. Welcome to Silicon Curtain. Please like and subscribe to see more of the fantastic speakers that we feature on the channel, and do, of course, consider becoming a patron to support the work of the channel or buy me a coffee. Elina, welcome back.
Well, hi, Jonathan. It's nice to be back, and thank you so much for inviting me for the second time.
Well, there's so much to unpack, and of course, in personal terms, one of the more momentous things that's happened in the last year is I got to visit Ukraine for the first time, which I know we were sort of corresponding around that, and I was seeking some advice about how to do things. Well, that trip happened, and it was successful, and of course, it brought a lot of impressions with it.
What is your biggest takeover from this trip to Ukraine?
The first, of course, is relief that everything we talk about on this channel is verifiable, and that is, Ukrainian resilience and the sort of values that we've been examining of not just how Ukrainian society has survived the Soviet Union, but emerged with a distinct identity and culture from that. I mean, that validated all these things, plus this battle between civil society, judicial reform, and trying to de-Russify. I mean, I saw elements of all this in reality, but also saw Lviv, which was so much more than I ever expected. Not just a beautiful historic city, but one that is clearly being restored with exquisite care and good taste by the Ukrainians, who are now 80% of the population, whereas prior to the Second World War, I think the Ukrainian portion of the population was about 20-25%. So clearly very impressive city, but also seeing the amount of new construction going on, tech parks, apartment buildings, offices, all built to an extraordinary sort of, I guess what they used to call, Euro standard, well projected, good planning, good design, and to see all this economic and technological and social activity going on was certainly not what I expected.
And I mean, I'm so glad that you got a chance to go there. And I remember when you were planning this trip, and I was very happy when you actually got there and you could see everything on your own eyes, everything that we talked about. And I actually watched your Superhumans episode, and I really loved it. And I think that this is what actually distinguishes us, the whole nation, the whole nation of defenders from the whole nation of aggressors. Because people who actually lost their arms, legs, they were able to walk again. And I was fascinated by this answer, and I keep on hearing it too, that people who were on the front line, but who were like severely injured after they got this opportunity and medical aid, they want to go back to the front line, and they want to defend, and they want to be there. So this is like the whole thing. When you actually you spoke with the head of this department, and Olga, right? And you could actually talk with people there, and you saw it with your own eyes. I think that it's very strong, and this is what makes, I think, the whole understanding that it doesn't matter what will be happening in terms of aid, military help. Well, we of course hope for the best and for the better that we will get it, but this is something that this is our existential battle, and we will be fighting, and we will be resisting, and we will be defending our land. And I think you showed it so well, and I'm really glad that you could see it. By the way, I was in Kiev too in August, of this year. And I also had a very wonderful experience because I could definitely compare it with my feelings in March 2022 when I fled the territory of Ukraine, and when it was the feeling that I was very scared, and it's like this constant feeling of fear because you don't know what to expect. And this time I could feel that, you know, people are giving this hope to each other. I think that whenever you see that other people are like working, doing their job, fundraising for the military, for the army, for their relatives, for their loved ones who are on the battlefield. And this is like this constant energy that just that you could feel like around you. And this is something that charges you with this hope that everything is possible, and this like constant energy of life everywhere. I don't know whether you experienced it or not, but for me it was like during this air raid sirens, you can be inside of the walls, so you have to go to get outside, and it's like people standing around and they're just waiting. Sometimes you can go to the metro station, like to the underground, and wait there. But so people are not running somewhere. They understand that this is the situation, it happened, but they are okay. They will be, they will be patient, and everything will be great in the end, like this.
That, and I was trying to put into words, I was trying to sum up the words that would sort of try to describe it, or the concepts that try to describe it, because as you say, you have the impressions both from talking to people and then being on the ground there. And it's difficult to then sort of distinguish all those impressions, but you have a sense of what's true and what's not. And I think it was one of my Ukrainian guests last week used a word that really resonated with me. I had a couple going around my head, but that word was authenticity. And I think when you see so much of, let's say, Russian propaganda or the Z Patriot stuff, etc., it's all the usual things that you superficially judge it for, but it's also inauthentic. There's something manufactured about the whole thing. It's not an organic kind of process. It's people without agency. It's people without a connection to their own society, people who've actually lost connection with their own humanity. And that, for me, makes a lot of the stuff we see happening and coming out of Russia inauthentic, whereas so much of what we see of Ukrainian character, and as you say, those human interactions, has an authenticity about it. And I think you're absolutely right, that those clips from Superhumans just distilled that idea of what that authenticity looks like.
I completely agree with you. And, you know, I want to just add that yesterday I was at the Ukraine House here in DC, and there was a screening of documentaries made by Reckoning Project. Probably you interviewed people from there, but they're amazing. They are documenting the war crimes committed by the Russian army in Ukraine. And they just showed this little village in the Kherson region that was occupied. And there were a couple of doctors who stayed in the local hospital. So under the occupation, they had to basically serve both Russian soldiers who invaded and people who were tortured by them. And that was like a very insane experience for them, but they didn't want to be suppressed and oppressed. So I think that one of the doctors told the story that one of the Russian soldiers got to this hospital, and she asked him, so why did you come? Why did you invade us? What did you want to do here? And he was like, well, I have a sick mom, so I need to earn money. And she was like, so you came here to another land to invade it and to earn money by killing other mothers. And that's like also the essential difference. And those people, they didn't want to be oppressed. And even though they were like, the Russian soldiers would use weapons to intimidate them all the time so that they could like cure people or Russian soldiers, they didn't surrender. And like even under the occupation, they had the Ukrainian flag on the Independence Day there. So like they clearly showed it doesn't matter what they will be doing. And there was like this phrase, at some point you just don't have this fear. And that's it. So people, I think the whole thing is that people who probably, I mean, everyone at this point had already take their decision, which side they want to take and where they want to be, like on this like evil side or on the other side, you know. So that is why right now it's like everything is very clear. But we have so many stories, yeah, and through the whole year, I think that we talked with you like 8 months ago, but I keep on finding and talking with people who would be telling more, and it gives just a whole perspective. But I agree with you.
I mean, this is. I started watching quite a few of these prisoner videos because they're recorded in Russian, which of course I can sort of understand them, have access to those materials, which a lot of other people don't, and a lot of the media don't. And it is interesting, isn't it, listening to individual stories? I mean, I've had this debate with people of all sorts of opinions on Twitter. And especially the trolls, their immediate comment is, whatever you're saying, you know, stop watching mainstream media and you'll get a completely different impression. Well, I point out gently that I don't get most of my input from mainstream media. It's a whole variety of sources, including Russian opposition sources. Whatever you know, people think of Russian opposition, they are actually quite good at generating reasonably comprehensive informational packages. They're not so good at actually being an opposition, but they are quite good at the media part of it. And of course, watch a lot of Ukrainian media output, some of which is in a mixture of Ukrainian and Russians, again, so it makes it accessible to me. But watching these prisoner videos is another kind of level, as you say, and hearing the insights, the questions, why did you come here? And of course, these aren't neutral interviews. The interviewer, who I'm going to try and get on the channel, actually, I don't know how his English is, but he does put those moral cases. You know, he tries to understand the prisoner's point of view. And then, as you say, then he really starts interrogating them from a moral standpoint and trying to see if he can push them into imagining or empathizing or understanding why their actions are wrong and why the punishment they're going to receive is commensurate with a crime. See if you can actually make that connection in their heads. Sometimes he does, and sometimes he fails. And you know, you realize that these individuals have no concept of society beyond their own immediate self-interest.
Completely agree with you, and that is why I'm so afraid for all the temporarily occupied territories. You know that I'm more or less focused on Ukraine's temporarily occupied territories and what strategies Russia uses there, because this is just the small picture of what is going on in Russia. They are trying to bring everything to this Ukraine's temporarily occupied territories, and that is why we need this victory faster, quicker, and we need to get all this support and military support faster, because I just don't want these territories to be occupied longer, because the longer we will have them, the more consequences we will have. And I agree with you. So it's just the whole, I think we talked like last time about it too, about the concept of this like Russian propaganda machine, what it tells and what means it has to spread all this information, because we understand that like we have to react to everything what they are telling, because it's a complete nonsense, and people living there, they don't have an opportunity to get this information like alternative sources. Like you are lucky enough because you have the access to alternative information, while those people there, they do not have it. So when Russian occupiers come, when the Russian army comes there, it well, definitely the first like steps is cutting off all the Ukrainian television and media, so that there were no alternative sources of information. And then this is like the whole campaign of brainwashing starts. And in one of my last pieces, I'm telling about this teenager programs that they have for youth, and what they do in terms of brainwashing them. So I read a lot of Telegram channels that are that's pro-Russian Telegram channels. So that is why this information is verified, meaning that this is what they write about their programs. And so you would be surprised that they have around 470 million US dollars for 2024 for basically, it's for the patriotic education of citizens of the Russian Federation. But we understand that a lot of this amount of money will go to the temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories. And I'm telling you about different programs that they have, starting from mobile centers, cultural centers, to opening of different cultural youth centers at the premises of the Ukrainian state universities that were seized by the occupiers. And then they have a vast majority of programs when they kind of like plant trees together, but with the military, within the military campaigns, because there are like Unarmia and Movement of the First and other movements. So basically they are trying to involve a lot of young people inside of their propaganda machine, but by different means. It's not necessarily just by the television, because those teenagers are exposed to a lot of information, a lot of like false information by different means. And sometimes it's not even like some bad, evil things that you can think of. Sometimes it's like some volunteer projects that involve a lot of youth. And imagine like the territory is occupied, probably parents don't have enough money to send these kids somewhere else or to offer them something else. So that is why whenever they are offered to join any volunteer project by the Russian forces, of course they will join it. And there are different types of groups, activities, starting with these drone classes, where they basically teach them how to fly drones, ending with, like sports festivals, where a local club from Zaporizhia or Kherson Oblast go somewhere to Russian territory and they exchange some experiences, I just even wanted to show you one of the messages that they put inside of it. So as we know that they are trying to promote the ideas of Russification, and that they are allegedly the part of the big motherland, meaning they are trying to impose all these ideas to teenagers. So I found one of the patriotic forum that was called Russia is Us. So, and they're like, the titles of their programs are as following: Love for the motherland, big and small. We are Russians. Russia is a land of opportunities. I mean, you definitely understand that they don't have any other choice and they don't give any other option to these young people to understand that this is not a territory of Russia, it's Ukraine. But a lot of evidence show that they just destroy the Ukrainian identity there by different means. And sometimes it's not only with just a weapon, which is the first mean, right? Sometimes, or interrogations or detentions, tortures. Sometimes there are all the other very subtle means how they do it. And that is why I'm very concerned. Yeah.
And does it vary by age? Because I can imagine that somebody who is a teenager or in their 20s will be able to hold on to their memories and identity. They will also be better at perhaps creating a double personality and perhaps pretending while preserving part of themselves. I'm guessing here, but as you get progressively younger, down to the sort of toddler age group, it must be easier to break those bonds and to run this brainwashing. So is this sort of generational differences baked into these programs?
Well, I feel that it is very scary because of the whole consequences that you have just said. Because like double personality, I feel that those teenagers who are able to distinguish that this is right and this is wrong. But if we talk about the aggressive means, like For instance, like their House of Unarmia, this is a military patriotic movement that basically prepares children to serve in the armed forces. It opens like a unit in different, it opens units in different parts of the occupied Ukraine. So they opened this unit at Ukraine's Melitopol State University, and the Young Guard of United Russia, the youth wing of the United Russia Party, has opened a branch in Mikhailivka, which is Zaporizhia Oblast. So they have a lot of these programs, and I'm doubting that people there have this opportunity to preserve their Ukrainian identity. So they don't have this option for the to have this like double personality, like meaning that sometimes you can preserve your Ukrainian identity, but accept the new reality for survival. But if they are aggressively imposing this new identity on them, teenagers don't have this opportunity. The only way out is only if they have the opportunity to see another side, to flee to the Ukraine's controlled territory, or to flee somewhere to Europe where they can actually preserve their Ukrainian identity. Because staying there, it's actually, it's dangerous to preserve this Ukrainian identity. And the more time will pass, the more obvious it will be. Because if you look, all the we have like more than 27,000 Ukrainian civilians taken and held as hostages in different Russian pre-detention centers, or in the prisons, or like elsewhere in the temporarily occupied territories. And the majority of them are political prisoners, people who are not accepting the occupation, not accepting the Russian identity imposed on them. So this clearly shows that it's good if this like teenager can distinguish that this is like this brainwashing programs, and apparently he doesn't need to be there, but sometimes it's just there is no other option. So he has to be there, he has to hear all this stuff, and he has to kind of agree with it if he or she wants to live there and just survive and preserve life.
I assume as well that the Ukrainian language is not tolerated, that all this is done in Russian and they are discouraged from speaking Ukrainian. The assumption also is that Russia will use soft cultural power, Russian literature to create an alternative and inverted commas attractive sort of alternative culture to embed these people in, very similar to, of course, the processes at work in the Soviet Union and the incentives that were provided for people to become part of the Russian elite, so-called, whether you be a scientist or some sort of cultural figure.
Yeah, you're quite right. So you're talking about these incentives, bonuses. So sometimes it's not imposed by the weapons or by tortures. Sometimes, so basically, I've read a lot of stories, and probably you also saw it, that people on the temporarily occupied territories, especially if they are active, politicians, activists with pro-Ukrainian views, or just simple residents, civilians with pro-Ukrainian views, they get this question. So do you want to stay here and accept everything that is going on and like collaborate with us? And if a person says, no, I don't want it, then he or she will be detained or just taken to the prison. There are not so many cases when people can actually escape after they told that they have, pro-Ukrainian views. So it's very hard, and that is why sometimes people just choose to accept these incentives or bonuses to also preserve life.
And now you are originally from the Crimea region, and I read another just sort of disturbing story, which actually came with video clips. I think it was being shared around by Dmitry Kuleba or somebody else who's obviously very prominent. And it showed a Russian organization called Smersh, which is a Soviet-era organization, and that is designed to look for, I would call it, cultural deviance or deviant behavior in a population, those who are going against the so-called Russian world and its values. And this particular clip showed a family running a shop in Crimea being raided by a large number of armed policemen, and then they were filmed making confession. Making a confession that they'd said disreputable things about the Russian army, etc. Do you know how this is working out? And is a filmed confession the least bad thing that could happen? I mean, I was imagining that all sorts of far more terrible things could happen for people who are identified as in any way promoting Ukrainian identity or victory.
It's the least worst thing that can happen. I absolutely agree with you, because in some cases, as you know, well, at this point, there are about 180 political prisoners in Crimea, with the majority of them are Crimean Tatars. And that's like the numbers, I think, as of February 2023. So we don't have Ukraine doesn't have an access to this territory. So that's why we assume that, just we, meaning the whole world, assume that the number is much higher. But as we don't have the access to these territories, we can't tell the number of it. But what you have just described, that's the typical behavior of, there is this pro-Russian Telegram channel where they basically write about people with pro-Ukrainian positions, and then people have to make these confessions that they do apologize for what they have said or what they have done in terms of like condemning the actions of the Russian army, or just being Ukrainians, simply being Ukrainians. And there was a case of a girl who had tattoos with Ukraine, and she also was, she had to make this confession in order not to be detained and not to be put into the prison. But as far as I remember, this August, the coordinator or someone from this like pro-Russian Telegram channel, Smerch, he was his motorbike or something was like there was an explosion inside of it, and I think someone blew it up. So it means that all the bad actions usually have consequences and have response. So it means that the resistance in Crimea also works, and well, if there is this opportunity, it punishes those who does all these things. But I think that it's obvious, and well, after the annexation of Crimea, those people who had the Ukrainian flag in their car simply could have been like ruined by some of the pro-Russian activists. So that is why whenever you are in the environment that is hostile to you, sometimes it happens just because of the whole process, how it was done. You just don't have any other way out than just simply to sit quiet and preserve your Ukrainian identity, So sometimes this is how it is done. But we know that, like if we talk about this resistance movement, that we have the National Resistance Center. You probably heard about it. It's the states. So they have like manuals for those people living on the temporarily occupied territories, and they, I think it was downloaded, as far as I remember, 100,000 times, meaning that this was the amount that people downloaded it and wanted to help the Ukrainian armed forces. And it shows the amount of people who, not the amount, but probably it's even more of them, but people who actively wanted to do something in support of Ukraine and show their support to Ukraine. And for me, it's always, whenever I see places that were occupied for many years, like for 9, like Crimea or Donetsk or Lugansk Oblast, and that if we have the evidence of people like with their signs that we are waiting for Ukraine, or this yellow ribbon movement, one of the partisan movements of Ukraine. I feel that those people are heroes, that regardless of this 9 years, they are still waiting for Ukraine to regain control over these territories.
Now, you're Washington-based, and you speak to a lot of people involved in policy decisions and so on, and yet you also have a obviously very clear idea of what the Russian world means in reality in occupied territories and in those territories which were liberated, Kherson, Izium, the area around Kharkiv, Bucha, and so on. So we have a very clear idea now of what the Russian world is, how it operates, how it imposes control. We also are starting to get, from comments I saw from Volodymyr Ermolenko on Twitter, a picture building up of absolute lawlessness. People in those territories living without any protection of rule of law, whether you, just whether you survive becomes a matter of sheer chance rather than any kind of process or predictive stuff that we in the West and the rest of Ukraine are familiar with. Is this terrifying picture of what the Ruski Mir is this really getting across to decision makers? Are they factoring it in? Are they trying to imagine what a Russian victory would mean, not just for Ukraine and the free territories of Ukraine, but for the Baltics, Poland, Romania, Moldova, and so many other places that would be threatened if Russia was able to actually carry out, its threats? Militarily, it can't, because it's not efficient and it's quite impotent to an extent. But we can see what would happen if it was victorious. Should we be imagining such a thing, and would that spur us on to more action?
Well, the interesting part of this question is that prepare for the worst, but hope for the best, right? So meaning that right now we are all observing a very important moment in the US in particular, and it's not only just a test for Ukraine, it's the test for the United States and the free world in general, because definitely, as you say, we hope that all policymakers, decision makers, congressmen do understand what it means, what's the life under occupation is, what's the life if Ukraine is turning into the black box. I would always call this term like a black box. You don't know what is happening there. The rule of law doesn't work. People are suppressed, detained, tortured, killed, injured, and their identity is destroyed. And then if we have this situation on the mainland of Ukraine, the continent's second largest country, then we understand that Ukraine will be terrorizing neighboring NATO countries and the countries of the European Union. Probably this is something that the whole world doesn't want to have there. And I completely agree with you that when you tell what would the Russian victory mean for the world, it's another territory controlled by Moscow, where anyone who resists is held in pre-detention centers, prisons, brainwashed by the propaganda machine, and more people will be fighting against NATO soldiers, because as I told you, I wrote it even to the anniversary of the first the date of the full-scale invasion this year, where I basically explained that, for instance, people in Kherson Oblast saw some of the soldiers from the self-proclaimed LPR or DPR Republic in Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, who were completely brainwashed and who were sure that they are in the war not with Ukrainians, that Ukrainians were not the threat for them, that they were in the war with NATO soldiers. So imagine, like, if that people who lived on this territory and were just simply brainwashed are sure that they are in the war with the NATO soldiers, nothing would change for them if the mainland of Ukraine would be occupied. So it means that more people will be conscripted, will be, mobilized, and will be fighting and terrorizing other countries. So even we have the number right now, because since the beginning of 2022, around 60,000 residents from the occupied territories of Ukraine have been forcibly conscripted into the Russian army. That's according to the Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine's Defense Ministry. So imagine the other number that can be if Ukraine is occupied, right? And I completely agree with you that we all heard Vladimir Putin's, ambitious plans, and he's not going to stop on Ukraine. Georgia, Moldova are definitely, at risk, and then Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and potentially even Finland. I feel that there are multiple estimations right now, but a lot of people would say that, helping Ukraine right now is actually cheaper than helping Ukraine then, because it may cost like 10, 15 times more, and it will ruin the whole international peace, trade, and Russian army can assault on the Baltics, and it means that it will be already the confrontation, the open confrontation with NATO. So that is why, in any case, except of Ukraine's victory, it will mean a long-term impact on the US and the NATO countries.
Another feature of the way Russia governs, that's probably the wrong word, but controls the occupied territories, is ethnic cleansing. So as well as these torture techniques, as well as turning the local population into a kind of second tier of citizens, there is also an effort by Russia clearly to both move Ukrainians out and move Russians in. What do we know in places like Mariupol and of course Crimea, where that's been going on for much longer? What do we know of the attempts to change the consistency of the population and swing it towards more Russian supporting, Russocentric population?
Well, unfortunately, this is what we are observing in temporarily occupied territories. You are correct. In Mariupol, we saw it because the advisor to the Mariupol mayor, Petro Andrushenko, would always explain it in his Telegram channel, saying that basically, Ukrainians had to flee this territory because it was completely shelled and attacked by Russians, and then a lot of people were imported there. So, and I also wrote this piece about sugar-coated myths that were created by the Russian propaganda, saying that allegedly there is no war in Mariupol, that it's a very, peaceful city, come here and we will rebuild the whole territory. So meaning that they are trying to kind of show the allegedly this is like a showcase of the Russian occupation, meaning that they can destroy something, but they can rebuild it, So, but in people who I spoke with, they say that it's not true, because there are different schemes how they, offer these particular properties, not to those people who were, whose houses were bombed, but to someone else. And they also brought a lot of people from Russia to work there. And there are even plans, I saw, and probably you saw this number, that they want to basically change the whole population by bringing 300,000 Russian people there. And Russian media also made the publications about those people who wanted to relocate to Mariupol, and they were explaining that they just want to live by the sea, and they heard that it's like a very peaceful city, but they don't understand that it's very temporarily, that after the counteroffensive, this city will be hopefully liberated, and it means that a new wave of hostilities will take place there. And with the whole I also found the one woman who fled the territory of Mariupol to actually Russia, but then she would go back and forth from St. Petersburg to Mariupol, and then she explained that she didn't want to live in Mariupol because prices were increased there, that it was not possible to, like there were queues, lines everywhere, there were no normal services, all the prices went up, and she didn't want simply to live even there. So even those people who like fled to the territory of Russia, because it's simply 60 kilometers away from the Russian border, right? So sometimes it was easier for people to flee there than to Ukraine-controlled territory. But if you just try to save your life, all the means are good, And even those people who fled there and lived somewhere in St. Petersburg and then decided to come back to Mariupol, they didn't want to do it because it's like a devastated city that is trying to be shown as a very peaceful city. But we all understand that there is truth, and there is this propaganda machine working. And of course, we will be seeing a lot of, packages and news stories on the propaganda media saying that Mariupol is rebuilt, but the reality is absolutely different. And for those who once, there is I wrote the story with like people who were living there, and they told that it was nonsense, and the absolutely different story is the reality. So yeah.
And of course,
coming back to your question of it's not only Mariupol, so this ethnical cleansing is actually taking place in all other territories. So basically it's squeezing out all the Ukrainians, people with active Ukrainian position somewhere else, and importing their people from Russia. And in the majority of cases, I see a lot of reports about taking and bringing a lot of Russian specialists to the Ukraine's temporarily occupied territories, because even residents staying there, they don't want to collaborate with Russian forces. And that is why, like in the majority of cases, like hospitals, they need to have someone there, and people don't want to work there. So they have to bring some, like their doctors. So I would be seeing some information like, I don't know, like doctors from St. Petersburg or some other places came over to like this particular settlement in Zaporizhia Oblast or Kherson Oblast. It means that the humanitarian situation is really bad there, and Russian forces understand it, and they just simply need to bring people there so that, kind of fix it. But we understand that also the same programs as for teenagers worked. They work for the Russian people too. So it's like incentives, bonuses, salary increases, and that is why people think, okay, so if I live somewhere in the remote, oblast of Russia, I can go to the Ukraine's temporarily, to the new region as it's shown in the propaganda media of Russia. And I can earn money there and live there happily, not understanding that it's just a false propaganda story, and the reality is absolutely different, that the Russian army invaded this land, killed, injured a lot of people who had to flee somewhere, or people who just simply had to flee somewhere. And then it's these people coming over there and allegedly trying to build their new lives there, which is kind of sick.
Yeah, absolutely is. And the other aspect of it, of course, is there has been an uplift in voices calling for negotiations, calling even for peace for land, not amongst, I would say, the more realistic supporters of Ukraine, but nonetheless, there are many voices already sort of chiming in, saying that peace for land is viable. Anyone who's spoken to any Ukrainians will know that that is not considered a viable option on the Ukrainian side for all the reasons you've just described there. The fact these are not, most people in these territories who are occupied, who were originally there, are not part of this Russian world, have not volunteered to be within it, and don't want to be so. And the consequences are really terrible for them. But this also aligns with propaganda narratives. This aligns with Moscow's interests. So how can Ukraine and especially from the position of, say, your position in Washington, really convince people that any kind of concept of peace for land is not viable and is not the key to a long-term stable situation?
Because we have already seen it, and we have, we have learned from the bad experience having the annexed Crimea before in 2014, and then hostilities in Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast in 2014, meaning that when we think that there might be a peace for land, it means that we are just giving the Russian army time to regroup, to reinforce, and to attack again. This is what we simply observed in 2022, thinking before all these 9 years that there is a diplomatic means to regain control over Crimea, which we all hoped for. Of course, no one wants to have a war on the territory of your land, but Ukrainians didn't choose this war. We were forced to be in this war in order to preserve our identities, and that's an existential battle right now. But did we ask for it? Of course, no. Not a sane person will tell you that, it's good to have a war on your territory and, kind of fight. But if you don't have any other option, this is what you have to do. So, and probably you read the article by the Commander-in-Chief, General Valery Zaluzhny, in The Economist, where he says that the battlefield currently reminds him of the great conflict of a century ago, that he said that we have reached the level of technology that puts us in the stalemate, and he concludes that it would take a massive technological leap to break the deadlock. So, but what it means, you probably also saw the President Zelensky explain today that, oh, okay, yeah, great, yeah, that it's not a stalemate, so that Russia controls the sky and Ukrainian army protect the troops. No, his quote, actually, I have somewhere, no one in Ukraine wants to just throw our people into the battle like Russia does. How can we overcome it? With the F-16s, we have to wait for our guys to get trained and for them to come back. When there is air defense on the front, our soldiers advance and then they deploy the equipment they have. So it's also, President Zelensky reminded us of Kharkiv Oblast, because we all thought that it was kind of a stalemate there. But then he said several military tricks and the Kharkiv region was liberated. So basically right now we need to have this military tricks. And General Zaluzhny also named 5 priorities that Ukraine needs to survive in the war with Russia. It's air superiority, electronic warfare, counter-battery fire, mine clearance technologies, and building up mobilization reserves. So it's kind of like we are talking about technological progress right now in the war, so that it could turn the whole situation as we saw it last autumn, when Kherson, Kharkiv Oblast were liberated. So everything is possible. It's just by appeasement of the enemy and of the aggressor doesn't bring peace. This is what we have learned, and unfortunately we know it too well.
And the last area to focus on, I think, is bringing this all together. And of course, it's the idea of victory and why it's so important, but also the sort of discussions that you'll be having and are getting more and more prominent are around reconstruction. And on the surface, this is incredibly exciting. And of course, the organizations involved in this want to make it seem as optimistic as possible. Behind the scenes, however, I understand that there are some serious doubts about the scale and speed of reconstruction and investment if Ukraine remains divided, if Russia remains in control of Crimea. These could have a significant block on inbound investment, on rebuilding, and indeed on what is required is the sort of restructuring of the Ukrainian economy to turn it into a motor of wealth generating and innovation generating motor that can then fund the required military and defensive capabilities that will be needed to then keep Russia at bay. So how crucial is victory, a swift victory, and I would say, the comprehensive victory, which is regaining all the territories, especially Crimea, not with Crimea as a kind of exception.
Well, the comprehensive victory is very vital and important. Without it, we would have another attack in several years or in a year. We don't know. So, like, Russians are learning from their mistakes, unfortunately, and another attack will happen even faster than we think. So that is why victory for Ukraine means that we are, we are getting enough of the military weapons and supplies that help us to work properly on the battlefield, regaining control over our territories, demining all the territories, because you know that this is, people who say that counteroffensive should be is failed, or they just simply, we all understand that you talked with the military experts who explain you what it means to demine 1 kilometer or, of the territory which was mined before, and all these defense lines. But it doesn't mean that we won't be doing it. We will be doing it with enough and proper military supply. So this is the first thing that we need. And then we need, like, step by step, we need to move step by step, meaning that we will be regaining control over all our territories with Crimea, because if Crimea is under Russian occupation, then why wouldn't Putin go further? So, like, why do we think that if Ukraine will let Russia to have this control over Crimea or any other territory, that it will stop them from attacking again and again? So I think that this is basically this wrong and false thought, thinking that it will happen. We had it before, but it didn't bring us there where we wanted to be, right? We want to have a peaceful land of Ukraine. We don't want to have any wars. And it means that with the whole divisions in Congress and all the happening right now with the division of Ukraine and Israel aid, it of course arises a lot of concerns. How would it happen? How will it be with Ukraine? But probably you saw that yesterday the Department of Defense announced security assistance to meet Ukraine's critical security and defense needs. And it is around $125 million to meet Ukraine's immediate battlefield needs, and $300 million in Ukraine security assistance. And it means that still we will be having, hopefully, this support, because it's crucial and vital for us, because this is something that will ensure that we can regain control over our territories and get these security guarantees, probably, and of course investment in rebuilding of our land, because this is something that Russia wants us to not do, so that we just forget about these territories and that's it. But it simply won't happen, because you saw it. People who were in Ukraine, they know it exactly what Ukrainians want and how they will feel secured, because with the I don't know, like 2/3 or whatever, 20% of our territory under control of Russia, we won't feel secured simply. And we know that it will repeat in a year or two or whatever. But I just also wanted to show that also the Department of Defense had this quote saying that security assistance for Ukraine is a smart investment in the national security, because it helps to prevent a larger conflict in the region and deters potential aggression elsewhere, while strengthening defense industrial base and creating highly skilled jobs for the American people. And it also shows the commitment of the US to support the Ukrainian people in the face of the Russian aggression. And it means that Ukrainians are, with this support, they regain control and they feel secured when the whole territory of Ukraine is under our control, because we fully understand what is going on there without any spots of these black boxes with the absence of rule of law, interrogations, detentions, tortures, killing, whatever. So it makes the whole land of Ukraine a very reliable partner for the European Union, for the Eastern native flank. I think it's so logical. Oh my God.
It did make sense, doesn't it? And I think people get hung up on labels, don't they? And they get hung up on nationalities. Whereas what we're really talking about here is a clash of systems. One is a laws-based system, which, as a young democracy, is still evolving in Ukraine, but is essentially the clash between a rule of law-based society and one which is based on lawlessness. But within that lawlessness, it is power that decides, who gets resources, who's at the top of the tree, as it were.
So that's it. And that is why Ukrainians are eager to fight and have this power and show this power. But for that, we need this support. That is why we are always talking about this military aid and additional funds, because we simply understand that we can do it, but we just need it. We need this, that, and that for this victory. So we are not asking other, nations or countries to be involved in our defending of our sovereignty and independence. We just wanted to do by ourselves, but yes, we need proper means for that. But everything is real, and then the whole world will have, the example where the rule of law, the situation where the rule of law was restored, because right now we simply see that I completely agree with you. It's the clash of two systems, the absence of rule of law and the rule of law. So we want to be on this better, light side, white side.
No, I think hopefully most people watching this channel will agree with that. Most people watching this channel, apart from the trolls and vatniks, of which there are some, are in full agreement with everything you've said there. And I think, if we can help people to really understand that the costs of defending their rule of law systems are only going to rise if this tyranny isn't pushed back. I think that's an important idea for lawmakers and so on. Elina, what you do is incredibly important. I'm so glad that you can add your voice to the channel yet again. And I look forward to the next time. But for now, thank you so much for joining us.
Jonathan, thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate your work and everything what you are doing for Ukrainians, because I feel that you are the Ukrainian voice, even though you're not Ukrainian, but I can simply call you that, but just by I think that you understand the whole process and the whole thing that is happening with the Ukrainians right now, and you simply feel it. And that is why you're helping us a lot. And thank you so much for doing it.